Continuing on with my list of the top 30 worst movies I've ever seen in my life, we have finally made it to the final two movies, the two worst films I've ever seen, and guess what? Both of them came out the very same year. They share about as equal of a plot, but one was definitely much worse than the one I'm about to talk about here. So number 2 on the list of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life is the Johnny Depp borefest that is Transcendence. In this movie, Johnny Depp plays Dr. Will Castor, who's the foremost researcher in the field of artificial intelligence, working to create a sentient machine that combines the collective intelligence of everything ever known with the full range of human emotions. His highly controversial experiences have made him famous, but they've also made him the prime target of anti-technology extremists who will do whatever it takes to stop him. However, in their attempt to destroy Will, they inadvertently become the catalyst for him to succeed to be a participant in his own transcendence. For his wife Evelyn, played by Rebecca Hall, and his best friend, played by Paul Bettany, both fellow researchers, the question is not if they can, but if they should. Their worst fears are realized as Will's thirst for knowledge evolves into a seemingly omnipresent quest for power, to what end is unknown. The only thing that is becoming terrifyingly clear is that there may be no way to stop him. So from the trailers, it looked like a mix between stuff like Akira, Chronicle, and Inception. Well, not only is it a mix of all those movies, but you can add in a little bit of Blade Runner, Star Trek, Star Wars, that god-awful Revolution show. Basically any sci-fi movie franchise that has ever been made to make for a horrendous piece of garbage. I'm not even kidding you. I hate this movie. I hate this movie so much. The fact that the script is like every single bit of every sci-fi franchise ever made was placed in this just to proves that the scriptwriter clearly did a marathon session of every sci-fi franchise out there, made over the course of the weekend, and just wrote the script on those principles without being clever or creative at all. And the fact that this was on Hollywood's Best Unproduced Screenplays, the Blacklist for 2012, like, what world would this script exist on that? Because, good lord, the movie is just unsubtle on how everything is. You can literally predict every single thing that happens in the rest of the film. The biggest unsubtle thing that they do in this is in the beginning, when Will's at a seminar. One of the people in the audience, the one who was going to shoot him 30 seconds later, asks him, "Are you trying to make your own god?" And that scene perfectly sums up everything that's wrong with this movie. It's trying to be way too symbolic and subtle, but failing miserably because the writer clearly doesn't know anything about subtle and symbolic elements after watching this. On top of that, nothing in this movie makes any damn sense. The anti-technology extremists are so much against technology that in order to track somebody down, they need technology. It's like those extremists came from the planet that the people who hated technology from Star Trek Insurrection came from. And we have no idea if they're supposed to be the bad guys or is Will supposed to be the bad guy. The movie can't decide who we're supposed to be rooting for or despising here. And the script just doesn't explain anything that's going on. Nothing. Well, okay, it has that one person who we're probably not supposed to like, Rebecca Hall, playing Will's wife. I hated her in this movie because she made it seem like that she was only doing these dangerous experiments with it. The only reason she was doing these dangerous experiments was because it's what Will would have wanted. No, she only did it because she wanted her husband back, and she almost never figures it out that all this happens because of her. Everybody's trying to tell her this is wrong, it's inhumane, which, by the way, good job of stealing the premise of Splice Rider. But does she listen? No, she just keeps doing it just because she wants her husband's dick again. I mean, it's pretty much just that. In addition to that, the rest of the cast is incredibly wasted in here. I could barely hear anything that Johnny Depp was saying in the beginning of the film. It's like he was mumbling his entire opening scene, like this is some ASMR stuff. I couldn't hear a damn thing he was saying at all, and everybody else at least was at least trying to work with the material given. And even Depp once in the computer, but that shit with Will's wife, just not listening to anybody and showing that she's not as smart as she should have come off as, was getting on my nerves pretty damn quickly with this movie. The visuals aren't even that great. Like, you barely see the visuals in here. The only real visual effect you can see here is that, oh, Will can heal people's wounds. But even then, it's so hard to see. For a movie that cost $100 million to make, there's no indication of that money being used on screen at all. This film is a joke. I mean, it tricks you into thinking that you're in for an epic sci-fi adventure thriller, But what it gives you is a simplified script with no explanations for anything. No visual wonder, a great cast being wasted on this material, and an unpleasant movie-going experience that does absolutely nothing new or creative and just wastes your time. You cannot do a science fiction movie and not explain why all this is happening. I'm sorry, you just can't do that. Everything in science fiction needs to have an explanation. It can't just happen. I don't care if you're the 14-year-old Johnny Depp lovers who aren't going to get it. It has to be in there. This movie is a joke. This whole movie is nothing but a fucking joke on the face of anybody who was expecting a smart, slick sci-fi thriller. It's a simplified piece of bullshit that fails on every single lever and has nothing new or rewarding to offer. Transcendence is a fucking piece of shit. It's the second worst movie I have ever seen in my entire life. Which begs the question now of what is the worst movie I've ever had the misfortune of sitting in front of? But we will answer that question along with some honorable mentions for the worst movies I've ever seen coming up on next week's show. But until then, if you want to see more videos like this, check out the last video I did where I talked about Sucker Punch, and then also the playlist below with the other movies that I covered as my worst movies of all time. So I'll see you next week for the conclusion of the top 30 worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Take care.